Sorry, this computer's really slow.
No, that's okay. Marty Kursky, you're supposed to go to the link on our chat or in our announcements. I had in our announcements on Tuesday that Tuesday and Thursday we're joining Andrea's class. So go straight there.
Can you write the chat again?
I'd put it in the chat again. It's an announcement that I also put it in chat right now. Can you see it now?
I don't see it either.
Can you see it now?
No.
Oh, it's quite a waiting room participants, sorry. There? Do you have any issues with the link? Marty? Can you? It should take you to another waiting room. Try it again. Maybe if you just highlight it and then push enter, that might work.
telling the whole story again. You have to know that the reader knows already about Harry Potter. So tell them something that they haven't considered. So really, really avoid a plot summary, because it's really easy just to retell the whole story again. That's not analyzing, right? That's just retelling. Be specific, be accurate. And then of course your terminology, you want to make sure and consider your literary terms in your literature. Be able to identify literary terms as you see them in literature, know what they mean, but know how they are being used in the literature is really important. So that's a good first page for this handout. This page here just talks about some common perspectives in literature. Like a lot of literature has to do with this idea of life-altering choices. Your main characters having a choice to make, right? Think about the purpose of your literature. What is it meant to do? And there's some good follow-up questions there. A lot of literature that we look at and analyze has a lot of conflict in it. And so what does that mean, right? And so this goes back to this idea of interpretive literature. You interpret the things that you're looking at. And that, of course, means going more in depth, right? A lot of literature that you look at does have this idea of human experience, which is a universal idea. So a lot of the stuff that you read and that you respond to, it does examine that idea of why do people behave the way they behave? Why is society a certain way in this literature? That's kind of what it's referring to, human experience. And then a lot of literature that we analyze does have irony. Irony is the opposite of what it generally means, right? So those are things to look out for. This was just looking at the basic structure, which we did talk about the other day when we all joined together on Tuesday. So that's just a diagram of how the essays, a general basic essay would look. So I'm going to stop there because we're not technically into introductions and body paragraphs just yet. We want to break that up next week. So if you want, though, take a look at this handout, kind of read through it, kind of skim it, because it will be useful, not only for this first paper that we're going to write in whatever English class, but also for other papers throughout the semester. So before we move into the assignment, because both groups are going to do this assignment today, I'll go over what the assignment is. But before we do that, there's just a quick video that I think is helpful. It does bring up some good points, especially post-secondary wise, for the papers and the essays that you're about to do. So let's take a look at this video.
I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll fix that. Let me see what I did here. Alrighty. Oh, I forgot to add sound. Sorry about that. Let's do that. I'm just gonna rewind it a little bit.
Let's be real here. You've got a 2,000 word essay due in less than 24 hours and you're watching a YouTube video. Look at your life, look at your choices. But wait to do that until this video is over, because today I'm gonna help you become a literary genius. Or at least write a paper that doesn't give your teacher more ammunition for wastebasket free throws. Simon Peyton-Jones, researcher for Microsoft, once gave a talk at Cambridge University about how to write a great research paper. In this talk, he advised the audience to start out the paper writing process with a pre-writing phase. Only once that's done should they go to research. Most people do this in the opposite way. They get their idea, they go do a bunch of research on it, and then they write their paper. But I like Joan's advice to go through a pre-writing phase first before doing any research because it does a couple of very important things. First, pre-writing will dredge up things you didn't even think you knew about the topic. This is something that professional writers know really well. When you spend some quality time writing in a focused state, your brain will make connections and serve up memories you didn't even know you had. As a result, you'll come up with lots of great questions and preliminary arguments that might just make it into your final draft. And this leads directly to the second benefit, which is more focused research. When you go into the research process armed with questions and arguments from your pre-writing phase, you'll have a much better idea of what you're looking for, and you'll spend a lot less time going down pointless rabbit holes. Now, the first thing to understand about the pre-writing phase is that it's not about cranking out a polished paper on your first try. For one, you haven't even done the research yet, but more importantly, a paper is a big project. And with big projects, you need to just jump in and make a mess at first. It's like an artist creating a sculpture out of a solid block of marble. Any good artist knows that it's much easier to hammer out the basic features right away instead of trying to jump right into the detailed work. And at first, the results are going to be a mess, but it's much easier to hone a mess into something great than to turn a solid block of marble into a masterpiece on the first pass. So let's get into the details. Personally, my pre-writing phase usually takes the form of a brain dump. Now, this is not an attempt to write a coherent paper. Instead, it's just a chance for me to get all my thoughts onto a piece of paper or into a document on my note-taking app. When I do a brain dump, I'll open a new document, set a Pomodoro timer for 25 minutes like we talked about in that procrastination video, and then I just start writing. Specifically, I'm looking to pull basically everything I know about the topic out of my brain, as well as identify any questions I might have. I'll also list out any main points I think will be important to cover, and finally, try to think of any specific external resources that might be useful to look at during the research process. Once you've done a brain dump, it's time to move on to the research process. Now, the biggest pitfall that most students deal with here is the tendency to get stuck in this phase forever. The author Cal Newport calls this research recursion syndrome. You get stuck in a loop of constantly looking for yet another source. In his book, How to Become a Straight A Student, Newport lays out an algorithm of sorts for ensuring you don't get stuck in this loop. First, you find your sources. Now, you'll probably find most of these at the library or on the internet, but it's also possible that you find them in an ancient temple full of booby traps. Pro tip, most teachers agree that being impaled by hidden floor spikes is not an acceptable excuse for turning in your paper late. Just so you know. A safer place that you might actually want to start with is Wikipedia. Now, some of your teachers are gonna say that Wikipedia isn't a good source, and they're right. However, the citation section at the bottom of each and every Wikipedia article is actually a really great place to find good sources, since Wikipedia holds their articles to high standards and requires high quality source material, like scientific studies, published in reputable journals. Aside from Wikipedia though, you'll also find lots of good sources through Google Scholar, journal databases like EBSCO, your school library, and one place you might not have thought of before, the notes or bibliography section in most popular science books. For example, Bill Bryson's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, contains 48 pages of citations and references to other works. Once you've found your sources, make personal copies of them. Create photocopies if they're in books or other paper formats, or add them to a note-taking app if they're digital. This ensures that you'll always have them available to you when you're writing without having to go look for them again. Next, you want to annotate the material. Skim each source, highlight the sections that you feel are specifically relevant to the arguments you want to make, and add any notes that might help you hammer out the details of those arguments when you're actually writing the final draft. Finally, consciously ask yourself if you're done. Cal's ballpark suggestion here is to have at least 2 sources for each main point in your thesis, and at least 1 source for any tangential or non-crucial points. Of course, this is a general suggestion, so you'll have to make the final call. If the answer is no, repeat the process. If the answer is yes, then it's time to write your first real draft. And this should be an awful first draft. There's a popular adage that's often attributed to Ernest Hemingway, which goes, write drunk, edit sober. Now, there are more than a few things wrong with this quote. First, Hemingway never said it. It's actually a pithy rephrasing of a passage from a novel called Reuben by Peter de Vries. Secondly, Hemingway definitely didn't write this way, even though he was a guy who definitely drank a lot in his spare time. However, it's still a useful piece of advice as long as it isn't taken literally. What it's actually getting at is the usefulness of letting the initial act of creation be free of scrutiny and restraint. And this is important because one of the most difficult problems that writers deal with is perfectionism. Do the thought bubble. Let me get real with you for a second. This video you're watching right now, creating this has been a dream of mine for years. Crash Course was one of my biggest inspirations for becoming a YouTuber in the first place. And ever since I started, one of my biggest aspirations was to be a host on this very channel. I wanted to be a part of the project that inspired me to start creating videos on my own. So I'll be honest, sitting here talking to you, being an animated character, this is awesome. But it's also intimidating because I felt like the series had to be perfect, and that made it really hard to write the scripts that you're listening to right now. However, once I reminded myself that they didn't have to be perfect the first time, the writing became much easier. I knew that my fantastic editor Meredith would help me hone each and every script into something truly great before I actually had to deliver it on camera. And once I acknowledged that fact, the first drafts became so much easier to do. This same mindset will speed up the completion of your own first draft as well. It's okay if your first draft is awful, because future you will be there to edit and shape it into something great. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Now, one technique that I found to be helpful during this process is to write my first draft in a different place than where I intend the final draft to go. This might be a separate document, or it might be an entirely different app. For instance, I write the first draft of almost every one of my blog posts and video scripts in Evernote, and later I'll polish them up in Google Drive. Using a separate app like this helps me to truly believe that it's okay to make a mess. Of course, that mess has got to get cleaned up eventually. Now, I did say a minute ago that cleaning it up is future you's problem, but eventually future you becomes now you. So let's talk about editing. I recommend editing your paper in 2 separate stages. Stage 1 is the content edit. Here, you're looking at your paper as a whole and asking yourself the most important questions. Does each argument support the thesis? Does the paper have a good narrative flow? Is each argument properly fleshed out and backed up with research or external sources? And what can be removed or written in a clearer, simpler way? Essentially, this stage is all about making sure the paper communicates your message to the reader as effectively as possible. It's not about spelling errors. Those you should save for stage 2, the technical edit. At this point, you're ready to go over your paper with a fine-tooth comb to identify any problems with the structure or syntax. Things like spelling and grammar mistakes, poorly structured sentences, formatting errors, or sentences that just don't sound right. I find that the most effective way to do a technical edit is to print out the paper and go over it by hand. It's just easier to catch mistakes when you're editing the paper in its final intended medium. Plus, by using pen and paper, you're prevented from making corrections on the fly. Doing so would require switching contexts from editing to writing, which can be fatiguing and makes it easier to get sloppy near the end of the paper. In addition to printing out your paper, you should also take the time to read it out loud. This forces you to slow down and prevents you from unconsciously skipping over any words, and it helps you identify any sentences that don't sound good. Finally, remember that one set of eyes isn't good enough, especially when they're your own. To make your paper truly great, you need to let other people look over it and get their feedback. Simon Peyton Jones has some more good advice here. First, realize that each person can only read your paper for the first time exactly once. Just like I can never experience the magic of Zelda Breath of the Wild for the first time ever again, single tear, nobody can ever read your paper with fresh eyes twice. So be strategic with your reviewers. Let a couple people read the first draft and keep other people on deck for the final one. Secondly, make sure to explicitly ask for the kind of feedback you actually want. When people aren't given direction, they'll naturally gravitate to looking for spelling and grammar errors, which aren't nearly as important as the big elements, like whether or not your arguments even make sense. Finally, after you've gotten your feedback and finished both stages of editing, print out your final draft and give it one final read through from start to finish. If everything makes sense and nothing sticks out as glaringly wrong, give yourself permission to be done. In all likelihood.
All right, so the guy talks pretty fast in the video, but he does bring up some really good points about writing a paper. And I know we haven't actually started writing a paper because it's coming next week, but these are good things to consider. You know, taking the time, I think that's the biggest message from this video, is when you have a paper due, look at how much time before it's due and start planning out how you're going to use your time wisely. So if you have a paper due in 2 weeks, then use the 2 weeks to do what the guy was saying. You know, do some pre-writing, get your ideas going, you know, do some drafting, do some revision. But if we leave this for the night before, there's no time to do all of that other stuff. And it could be very frustrating when you're trying to develop a paper, especially a larger paper, like 5 pages, 10 pages, like it's coming, right? Eventually in your post-secondary. And you don't want to leave them for the night before because it's very, very overwhelming to try to do all of it, you know, in a few hours. So I like the video just because he brings up some good points as well. Before we go, there's an assignment here called Analyzing an Essay. I know both groups are doing this assignment. Swaki has it posted on her Moodle page. And so the details are the same. So we could talk about this together. So the assignment here is to read Drew Hayden Taylor's essay. It's called Call of the Wild, or Call of the Weird, actually, sorry. And it's attached on my Moodle page just at the bottom here, but Swaki also has it attached on her Moodle page too. So as you're reading the essay, just make sure to consider all the important areas or any of the keywords that make the essay effective or ineffective. Like if you're not feeling the essay, then you can definitely say that in your response, right? So respond to the following questions. Make sure that you have thoughtful, correct sentences. I always give an extra mark for a good sentence. So if somebody has the answer to the 3 parts of the question, there's 3 parts, but if the sentence response isn't that great, then there's a mark taken away for that, right? So just pay attention to the value of the question. That kind of tells you how many answers should be in your response. So it's only 6 questions. It's nothing stressful, but a really good idea when you are answering questions to something is read the questions first. Know what you're looking for as you read whatever you have to read. And this works for like biology, social studies, whatever. Always look at the questions first, because as you do the reading, then you can highlight or you can make notes, and you could be like, oh yeah, this is what I was supposed to do, right? And of course, you can always go back to the questions, but it kind of gives you a jump start when you're reading if you already know what you're looking for. So there's 6 questions here. The first question is, think about the title of the essay. Like essays with a title, and they should have a title, they're significant for a reason. So when you write your first essay and when we start talking about this next week, you do want to think of a really good title for your essay. You don't want to just say essay number 1, because a reader doesn't want to read essay number 1, right? You want to read something that's interesting. Just like when you read the newspaper and you look at the headline of a newspaper, if it's a good headline or interesting, you'll read the article. But if it's kind of like a very dull headline, you might skip that article in the newspaper. So that's what question number 1 is asking. Think about the title of the essay. Like, what does it represent? What does it reflect in the essay? Could there be a better title for this essay? And that's the 3rd part of the question there. Question number 2 talks about irony. And it's a term that we should be familiar with anyways, but just a quick recap. Irony is kind of what we say versus what we really mean. And there's 3 types of irony. There's verbal irony, kind of sounds like sarcasm. There's dramatic irony, when we as a reader know more than the characters. And there's situational irony, where we're kind of surprised by what's happening in that literature. So irony, if you want, you could look it up before you answer this question, but that's kind of what irony represents. Not kind of, that's what it represents, is what we think or what we say versus what is really meant, within a piece of literature. So he does talk about misconceptions about Aboriginal people. So that's something to look out for in the essay. And then, of course, part of that question is mention one of the misconceptions and explain why it's ironic in the essay. The 3rd question is to identify the thesis statement. So find the one sentence in the essay that literally sums up the whole essay. Like, what's the main point of the essay? Find that sentence and you can record that. But you also want to explain why you think it's that essay. What is the main point of his essay? And could there be a different thesis statement? That's part of the question as well. Number 4 is, what is his attitude towards the topic and his audience? Just kind of a heads up. He's kind of being very sarcastic in his essay. So there's just a clue there. But we did talk about tone. And so figure out the tone of his essay. Describe the tone. And why do you think it is that? That's the second part, is how is his tone, his attitude conveyed through his vocabulary and his writing style. So we did talk about that already. And then you want to find an example from the essay that just supports why you think the tone is sarcastic, or why do you think he's being ironic, and what words indicate that. Number 5 question is, respond to the serious issues of prejudice and racial stereotyping. So one of the biggest main points in the essay has to do with, prejudice and racial stereotyping towards Aboriginal people as writers, but he does this in kind of a humorous way, like he's trying to be funny. So talk about how that works in the essay or doesn't work, and then find an example from the essay that backs that up or backs your idea up. Question number 6 is really easy. That's up to you. What are your final thoughts? Did you find it a good essay? Was it effective? Did you not find it effective? And why? So 6 is an easy question. So for my group, the essay is right here. You just have to click on the PDF to read it, and then you can do your assignment there. One thing I forgot to put on here is you could create a Word document. Just copy and paste the questions to your Word document, then you could just type in your answers. Yeah, but make sure and read over your answers before you submit. Remember, just make sure they're good sentences. You have all your information there.
Just for my group, I didn't understand when I was putting all, excuse me, all of Andrea's files on. I didn't realize that Moodle, they don't all show. So I'm separating all the files so they'll be individual files. So the Taylor essays will be on one section with the questions. You know, I'll make it separated so it's easier to view. So you'll see that when you go to Moodle next time.
So for my English group, you guys are going to hate me, but this is due today because we're ending early and you have all this free time this afternoon. Yay, here's an assignment. 6 questions.
To Swaki on Moodle, we don't have the Taylor's assignment PDF on Moodle. We can't access it or read
No,
it.
I have to change that. I was talking to Andrea last night and she told me what the problem was, is that I put everything into one assignment. I thought you could see all, I downloaded all the files, but when you're the other person looking at it and trying to open it, it only shows you the first one. So I have to go and I'll change the title and I'll make sure that each file has its own title and it has its own file. That way you'll be able to go, it'll look like a lot more, but it should be about 6-7 files, but it's just the readings, the PowerPoints, and then the Taylor essay, and then the questions. So you'll have that all together. That's the assignment. The other stuff is if you're getting stuck on the questions, like you can't remember your irony, you can go to your vocabulary list. If you can't remember like specifically what tone is asking for, go back to Andrea has a PowerPoint all on tone. You can go back there and review that and then come back to the questions. So I'll have them all on there. I didn't know that you couldn't put all the files in one assignment.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to separate them all.
Okay.
So I have a quick staff meeting, and then by this afternoon, your guys isn't due today, so don't worry.
Mine is. So you guys worry.
but hers looks proper on Moodle. Mine's on Gibbly-Gawk. So,
Now
I'll fix
everyone's
mine and
wanna
you'll see.
jump into Swaki's class. No, just kidding. But it's a quick little assignment. It's not meant to be, time consuming. It's just read the essay. It's only 2 pages. And then there's 6 questions. So it's stuff we've talked about. You should be able to identify it very quickly. It says that it's due today. However, oh wait, shoot. It says that it's due on Tuesday. Oh, you guys are lucky. Okay, there. So my group, it's due on Tuesday. Shoot, I thought I fixed it. I was going to be wicked, but I can't be wicked. So they're both groups. It's due on Tuesday.
There you go.
Problem solved. But if you want, get it out of the way, right? It's pretty straightforward. It's nothing too stressful. Just, I guess the last note before we wrap up is reporting period tomorrow. Do what you got to do. You got this afternoon now to work on whatever you have to for whatever class. If you're feeling stressed out, go class by class. Don't try to do all of it all mixed up, right? Maybe just focus on English this afternoon, this evening. Save the easy stuff for tomorrow where you can easily just get it done and submit it, right?
And don't forget that video we watched that talked about if you're getting frustrated with a problem, something you're working on, put it down for a second, take a break, get up, walk around, stretch, do something that takes your mind off what you're doing, and then come back to it, because that might help. Sometimes you just keep beating yourself in the head over a problem for an hour, you're not getting any further.
If you leave it last minute, then that's what's going to happen.
Then you're going to start freaking out.
Yeah. Don't email me if you freak out. No, just kidding. You could email if you want. So yeah, that's it. I think any questions before we call it a day? I believe
Vanessa's
next
hands up.
week. Oh, there we go. Sorry, Vanessa, what's up?
No worries. I just wanted to know how long your guys' staff meeting was.
I don't know.
I was gonna try and get a hold of somebody.
It might be a
Of
couple
Trish?
hours, I think.
It's usually a
Yeah.
couple of hours.
Oh, okay.
Roy has to be someplace at 1, but I don't know what the other people's schedule is like. But email them. They could probably,
Alrighty,
whoever
I'll
you're trying
just
to get a
wait.
hold of, you could probably email them and they'll check their emails this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you.
Swaki.
Pressing mute, unmute. Yes.
Is this gonna be posted on our Moodle page?
Yes, it's already on our Moodle page, but I didn't post it properly, so I'm gonna go in and fix it.
Okay.
So I'm not quite
Swaki,
sure what our staff meeting's about, but I'll fix it so you'll see it all in individual files. Yes, Olivia?
what are we supposed to have in for tomorrow?
You need to have your PowerPoint in and you need to have your paragraph assignment. No, we don't have an assembly at 1 p.m. That was supposed to be a staff meeting. So you guys kind of have the afternoon free to do your catch up on anything you need to get in for reporting period. tomorrow.
Does this analyzing and essay need to be in by tomorrow too?
No, this is something that's not due to next week.
Okay.
So you guys can work on it. I'd concentrate on what you need to have handed in by reporting period. You've got the weekend to work on this assignment, and you've got Monday too. So you guys have time.
Okay.
So I wouldn't stress about this assignment right now. I'd work on whatever you still haven't finished for reporting period.
What needs to be done for reporting period?
Your PowerPoint and your paragraph assignment.
Like the paragraphs from the 20
The
sentences?
20, yeah.
Okay, I got them.
Yeah. And don't forget to review your hamburger. Go back over the reviews and the videos if you're not sure. If you haven't started your paragraph, go back and review those.
Okay.
I know it's a little bit much when we join classes. The reason why we're trying to meet up with the other class, like both English groups, is because we're talking about essays, and there's a lot of different perspectives when you write an essay and talk about it. So we're hoping that by joining the groups, we can kind of cover all of it. So I hope you guys don't mind. I know it's a little bit much, with assignments and what's due and what's not due. So randomly we'll be joining the other group, and then
And that was one of
sometimes
the
it'll be
things that you
independent.
guys asked for. You said you wanted more collaboration, and I think it works out well when you guys get to meet with other students in your same kind of group, but at different levels. It gives you different perspectives, like Andrea says, and I think it's a good experience for you. So we'll be doing it throughout the semester, and hopefully you get to do it in your other classes too. Sorry, Danica, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Andrea, I was looking at my attendance online, and I'm just wondering, is that like the official attendance? Because it says I was only there for one class for Tuesdays, Thursday, and one class for the lab.
I can double check it. What I did was I had all my stickies, and then I took one evening and entered everything. So if I've missed something, I can fix it. Don't worry about it. So that's a good point. Everybody check your attendance. Sometimes there's a lot of names and might forget to click on something. Just let us know and we can fix it. So I'll fix it for sure.
Another thing is, if you're coming in late, and like if I have students that come in late, and let's say I'm watching a video and you come in late, I can't go in and change your attendance that moment. And by the time the video is done and I've done a lecture, I might have forgot you came in late. Make sure if you do come in late that you check with your teacher at the end of class. Did you mark me down? Did you mark me down? I came in late, but I was here, so that you're not marked absent for that day, okay? Because that goes towards your funding, right?
Swaki.
Uh-huh.
I have attendance issue as well, just to double check, because I've been online with redcrow since Monday, the first day of orientation, but I've had technical difficulties that have been resolved throughout that week and the following week after, but transferred into your class, I think the 4th Friday.
Okay.
And that would be, I'm just wondering if you could look at that and maybe I could get some grace for the perfect
Can you email
attendance.
that to me?
Pardon me?
Can you email the dates to me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'll go in and do the attendance and make any changes that need to be made.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you didn't join my class till then, I'm not going to worry about that first week. I couldn't really give you any. I couldn't have. You wouldn't have come up as absent if you weren't on my list yet. But I'll double check. But yeah, send me those dates.
All right. I think that kind of is it for today. But if you have questions, email myself or Tswaki, and we'll get back to you this afternoon at some point for sure.
There you have it. There's class for English 30-2. The date is 20/22/03/03/11/42. So yeah, that's my school. I have to record it because in the mornings I'm really airheaded and I can't think straight. So I record them and put them on YouTube so I can go back and rewatch them, and I make them public for people to watch too that are in the same schooling as me, but I doubt anyone will see these and use them. But it's alright. I'll watch them and check them out. But yeah, that's my class. How stupid things get on Red Crow. I haven't recorded Trish Weasel Fat's class yet, but I'm going to. And you're gonna see what kind of stupidity is in that class compared to these other classes. These women that were just on this Zoom meeting, this video, they're good teachers. Well, Suwaki is. She seems like a good person who really cares about children, students getting ahead. When I start recording Trish, you're gonna see how she favors, and it's like love bombing, but in a teacher-student kind of way. So yeah, enjoy you guys' day. I'll start recording more later. Oh, and be posted for my video game posts. I'm gonna start posting video games, playthroughs, long plays, and strategy guides for games that I know how to beat. Hopefully I can make money that way. Well, you guys have a good day later.